It's time for baseball's last frontier, stories from the Pecos League, the new podcast that will open your door to baseball's entry level, telling you the stories of the teams, players, and coaches of an independent minor league circuit through the eyes of our man on the inside, Evan Katz. I'm your host, Bruce McClure, and I have the pleasure of introducing to you my friend, partner, and co-host, Evan Katz. Evan, how we doing?
Doing great. I'm on day 4 of my 4-day trip out to Roswell, New Mexico, the home of the Roswell Invaders. I'm in Bristow, Oklahoma, on Old Route 66, about a third of the way between Tulsa and Oklahoma City.
All right, I got to tell you, I have no idea where that is. I know Route 66, but do you have any sense of being able to give the listeners an idea geographically of where you are in Oklahoma?
We are almost in the middle of Oklahoma. How about that? Does that help?
That'll help. So get out your maps, folks.
Central Kansas to the north, north central Texas to the south, Arkansas to the east, and prairie and oil country in Oklahoma to the west.
All right. Well, let's start with your story. I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about you, your baseball journey, and what landed you in the Southwest for 2024's baseball season.
Well, I think I'm typical of a lot of kids growing up. I always wanted to play Major League Baseball, or at least professional baseball. The only problem was I never played adult baseball until I was 45. So that opportunity had apparently passed. But when I was 60, I was at a baseball camp with some professional coaches, and I thought, maybe could I possibly get a contract to go and play professionally in a minor league? And they said, sure, go for it. And it took me a year and a half. I contacted the Pecos League, which was formed in 2011, spoke to the commissioner, Andrew Dunn, told him about my dream. You know, and Andrew, one of his mottos for the Pecos League is for rising stars, shooting stars, and falling stars. And I think I fit into one of those categories, and that's why he allowed me to join the White Sands Pupfish in 2017, where I pitched to 2 batters, walked 1 who eventually scored, and gave me an infinity ERA. Now, it's great at 61 pitching in professional baseball, and I was very, very excited, and my friends were impressed. But as time went on, I became frustrated with my infinity ERA. And as it turns out, I started coaching high school baseball, and I was playing adult baseball. And last year in 2023, I decided to contact Andrew Dunn again. And I said, Andrew, I would like to get my ERA below infinity. And again, at the age of 67, he invited me to the Pecos League. I pitched for the Austin Weirdos in Alpine, Texas, against the Alpine Cowboys. And they were very short-staffed, and I actually started a game and pitched into the 5th inning. I got 12 outs before I gave up 12 earned runs, and I got my ERA down from infinity to 29.25. I think that's an impressive reduction. And so after that, I was so impressed with the Pecos League and the organization in Alpine, which is one of the top franchises. I asked the commissioner after the season, I'm a baseball coach. I've been a pitching coach for a number of years. Would any of your teams need a pitching coach? The pay is low. Some teams don't even have pitching coaches. And the commissioner assigned me to the Roswell Invaders, and I'm going to be the pitching coach working with manager Garrett Toddy, an experienced Pecos League manager.
Well, now you have a entry at Baseball Reference, correct?
That's correct. Yes, actually, when I did pitch, when I was seeking my minor league experience back in 2016 and 2017, one of my goals was to get into a league that got posted in Baseball Reference. And that was one of the reasons I picked the Pecos League. There were a couple of other leagues that didn't qualify for Baseball Reference. So I am in Baseball Reference, recording my Infinity ERA back in 2017.
All right. So homework for everybody who's listening to our podcast this week. I want you to go to baseballreference.com, look up Evan Katz, and you're going to see him there. That's your homework for the week. So tell us a little bit about the Pecos League. Now, before we started this endeavor, I knew nothing about this league. And in the research that I've shown, or I've done, it shows as being a very long established circuit with some very interesting stories, some very interesting facets. Tell us a little bit about it. You've got some experience there.
Well, I've done a little bit of research, talked to the commissioner, talked to some managers and players, and the league was formed in 2011. I think it's fair to describe it as entry-level independent baseball. As many baseball fans know, teams have their affiliated single A, double A, triple A teams. There's a tier of independent leagues that are affiliated with Major League Baseball. They're technically independent, but they have working relationships. They do rules experiments and test out some technology. Those leagues are the Atlantic League, the American Association, the Frontier League, and the Pioneer League. The Pecos League is a notch below that. The Pecos League doesn't pay very much. Its season is short. And players drive their own cars on the road. So if you want to play in the Pecos League, you really have to love baseball. And it's really an opportunity for players who want to be seen, feel like they haven't had an opportunity in college, in college, to demonstrate their ability to play in the minor leagues. And it's perfect. The timing is perfect. The season starts at the end of May, and it runs till the end of July. What that means is that college players have a chance to finish up pretty much, except for those Division I schools that might be in the playoffs. And the season ends on July 31st. So if you're an aspiring ball player and you think you're a talent that has been missed, you can come to the Pecos League, play for 8 weeks in the 54-game schedule, and it's very possible that you'll get picked up by one of the independent leagues, often the Pioneer League or the Frontier League, because their seasons go into September. And I'll note that the Alpine Cowboys, located in Alpine, Texas, a former Boston Red Sox minor league team, they placed 16 players in higher levels of professional baseball after last year. So the Pecos League every year moves up a few dozen players. So if you're seen playing well, there's a very good chance you'll get picked up by a higher level league.
So this league is well scouted by Major League Baseball. Is that correct?
Well, I can't tell you specifically. It's certainly followed, and I suspect there are probably scouts in the stands. The quality of play varies somewhat. There are some strong franchises. Historically, Alpine, Tucson, and Roswell, they've won a bunch of championships. Roswell's won 4, and it's been described to me that those 3 franchises are the Cardinals, the Yankees, and the Dodgers of the Pecos League. So, and our stats are posted online. So someone that's following virtually can see who's doing well. And as we all know, it takes an eye test to really see what a player has, but clearly players are scouted and are signed. And one of the other advantages to the Pecos League is a lot of times in the minor league, you have a formal contractual arrangement with the team. And in order for another league to acquire your rights, you have to, the team has to receive a buyout payment of cash. The Pecos League has no buyout. So what that means is if you come in and play 4 or 5 weeks and just hit for power, strike a lot of guys out, end up with a low ERA, if you're contacted by another team, you can go right away to another league. So that's another advantage for players that do play there. You fill your stuff, and you can get picked up by another league in the middle of the season or at the end.
How often does that happen?
Well, it varies from year to year and team to team, but a few dozen players every year. In fact, I believe there's a player on the Brewers right now who played in the Pecos League a few years ago, and I believe the total number of players I heard the commissioner mention a couple weeks ago is about, I think, close to 10 players that have played in the Pecos League have now played in MLB. So it is possible.
Wow. And now you're the pitching coach for the Roswell Invaders. Tell us a little bit about your approach and your role with the team. Now, I know that as baseball's entry level, you wear more hats than the average pitching coach, and I know one of them is also recruiting. So give us an insight into your day-to-day with Roswell.
Well, let me just backtrack a little bit. There's a couple of things that people need to know about the Pecos League. First of all, it's a high altitude, high offense league. The average elevation is about 4,000 feet in the mountain division. There are 2 divisions. There's a California division, with 6 teams, and the mountain division in the central United States stretches from Nebraska, North Platte, Nebraska, as far west as Tucson, as far south as Alpine, Texas, and as far east as Blackwell, Oklahoma. So it's a high offense league. Teams on average score 10 runs a game, one team. So you can have scores of 12 to 8, 13 to 5. A lot of runs are scored. And then it's a high altitude league, as I mentioned. So when you're a pitching coach, you have to go into it understanding you're not going to be holding the opposition to 2, 3 runs a game very often. So the goal is to have an understanding, your mindset for pitchers, where you get higher levels. You're hoping that a pitcher will hold the opposition to 2 or 3 runs over 6 or 7 innings if the pitcher's a starter. My philosophy is, my approach for pitchers is, your job is to keep us in the game. A guy might give up 4 or 5 runs in 5 innings, and if we're up 7-5, we're in good shape. But I always say to pitchers, when you leave the game, you want to make sure we're still in it. And so from that regard, I've been sending out emails to college coaches, scouting at games, but I've not been just recruiting pitchers. Being up in Boston, I live in Swampscott, Massachusetts, the home of Tony Conigliaro. Longtime Red Sox fans will remember him from the mid-'60s, slugger whose career was tragically curtailed by getting hit in the head with a pitch in 1967. But I have been talking to scouts. I actually saw a couple of major league scouts at Northeastern University, a Division I powerhouse in Boston. So I'm looking at pitchers. I'm looking at position players, because even though I'm the pitching coach, I need to be recruiting. In fact, most of my work, when I started, I think last November, and had a phone introduction to our manager, Garrett Toddy, Totty, who lives actually not far from where I am now. He lives in Morris, Oklahoma, south of Tulsa, a little east of here. He said, you want to recruit not just pitchers, you're recruiting everybody. So I'm looking for catchers, and I'm really looking for a couple of things. I'm looking for an attitude and a spirit and a determination that can't be stopped. When you're pitching and giving up a lot of runs, and we all know at high altitudes, breaking pitches don't break as much. Fly balls travel farther. Fans know when you hear stories about Mile High Stadium in Colorado where the Rockies play, how difficult it is for pitchers and how hitters just love being there. So the pitchers that I'm looking for, I want guys who are tough and guys who just won't be denied even if things don't go exactly the way they want. But one of the things that I've really put a premium on is pitchers who can throw strikes. If a pitcher can throw strikes, he can get a first pitch strike. If he can throw a strike on a 1-1 count and he can command both sides of the plate, I think he can be effective in the Pecos League. And so some pitchers, you can look at their records in college, 3 or 4 years worth of statistics, tells you something. Other times you have guys that haven't played that much and you have to look at video. I've looked at bullpen video, game video, just to get an understanding. And what you want to do, at least from a pitching coach perspective, when I'm watching a pitcher, I'm looking for a consistent delivery and balls over the plate or at least near the plate. That's the job. If you're not throwing strikes in the Pecos League, you're going to be walking guys, and then you're going to be trying to get the ball over the plate, and you're going to be giving up a ton of runs, and you won't be effective.
So where are you looking, for lack of better term? I'm assuming you're beating the bush for players as you are working with your recruiter's hat on. You mentioned colleges, Division I, et cetera. Where exactly are you looking in that general area in the Southwest? Are you looking nationally? Where are you finding your ball players?
Well, I have because I write for the Society for American Baseball Research. I have a little bit of a network. I've been playing adult baseball since my 40s. I've been going to a baseball camp with professional coaches, and I was a high school coach for 3 years. And I have a network around Greater Boston. And I started emailing people and calling people and saying, do you know any guys that might want to play professional baseball? I've gone to games. Endicott College in Beverly, Mass. They are a very strong Division III team. Fisher College plays nearby where I am. They're a strong Division III team. We've actually got a player coming from there. It's word of mouth. You let people know. Former coaches, in fact, the head coach where I was a high school coach at Manchester Essex High School, B.J. Weed, former Angels minor leaguer, he was the one that gave me my start in coaching a few years ago, and ultimately we won the state championship in 2022. He referred me to a player in the area who graduated from Bowdoin College, a small college in Maine. He graduated in 2019. I called him up. He's 27 now. He's been an assistant coach at a private high school, but he has never lost his desire to play professional baseball. You know, he graduated right before COVID, and we all know how things changed then. A lot of college players had their careers disrupted. He is as inspired and committed at age 27 out of college for 5 years as any college player that I've talked to. And so it's just a question of networking, talking to people, friends of friends, and you never know where you're going to come up with a name. When I tried to play professional baseball in 2016, 2017, now I'm a sidearm pitcher, and I belong to a group called Sidearm Nation, which was founded by a former professional sidearm pitcher, Jeff Freeborn, lives in British Columbia. And I've been staying in touch with Jeff over the years. He has sent me a constant stream of players, pitchers and position players. And I end up looking at their stats on Baseball Reference. I look at their college statistics. I call them up, find out what their background is, how motivated are they, do they understand the demands of the Pecos League, and do they want to come and live out their dream? I had that dream when I was a little kid of playing professional baseball. I'm talking to kids in their 20s now. They have a dream of playing professional baseball. And if that dream drives them, that comes out in our conversation. And then when I explain to them, we don't pay that much, We have to drive our cars on road trips. And by the way, I calculated Roswell is going to be driving 5,700 miles during its season this year. And a lot of times it's after the games. But does the player have the fire to overcome the challenges that they're going to face? And so you look at their statistics and see if there's some level of consistency, some level of improvement. You talk to the player and find out how motivated they are. Do they get discouraged when you talk to them about the Pecos League? And if they're all in after the conversation, then you say, okay, let me talk to the manager. I go to Garrett. I say, should we invite this player to camp? He gives the okay, and we start getting information out to the players. And right now we've got over 20 guys showing up in Roswell on Wednesday, May 22nd. That's our first day of training camp, just a little more than a week before the start of the season.
We'll get into training camp in just a minute, but you've mentioned a couple of times about players driving their own cars and how many miles you're putting on the cars. Man, I hope you don't have a lease.
Excuse me. No lease. No, I just had my car checked out, and it's been the 2,000 miles I've driven from Boston in the last 3 days. It's going great. I think I have less than 600 miles to go now.
So you drove out there. You're going to put another 5,000 or 6,000 miles in your car. I can't fathom this with the number of miles in 2 months.
Well, being a retired public sector finance person, I looked at our road trip schedule, and I have a few factoids for you that will makes you feel better. Made me feel better. The median trip is only 270 miles. So that made me feel better. The total gets ratcheted up by two far off places, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the median trip is only 270 miles. We only travel to more than one city twice. So that takes a lot of the edge off the travel. The most daunting trip we have is in the beginning of July, but we have to drive 610 miles from eastern New Mexico and to northeast Oklahoma, 610 miles to Blackwell to play the Blackwell Flycatchers, 600 miles. Fortunately, we have a day off on either side of that 4-game series, I believe. The other long trip is west to Tucson. And we stop in Santa Fe, I think, either on the way to or on the way back. So that takes some of the edge off. But we do have 2 long trips. So the total is really boosted by our trips to Tucson and Blackwell, but most of the trips are pretty close. Pecos, Texas, an expansion team, that's about 160 miles away. Alpine, Texas is about 100 miles further than that. Trinidad, Colorado, in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, altitude 8,000 feet.
Ooh.
So that's 1.5 miles high, if you're doing the math. We go to Santa Fe, we go to Tucson, Western Kansas. I don't believe we go to Garden City, but they visit us. And then another expansion franchise. First time for professional baseball in North Platte, Nebraska. Since 1959, the North Platte 80s is a new team this year named after Route 80, which goes through North Platte. But North Platte is also well known for anyone who likes to read nonfiction baseball. The author, Pat Jordan, who was a bonus baby signed by the Braves in the late 50s, he played in the Nebraska State League. And one of the franchises was North Platte. And Pat is still living in South Carolina, I believe. And his book, A False Spring, it's a great read about 1950s baseball, bonus babies, and when the minor leagues were still thriving in the late 50s. North Platte was last in professional franchise in 1959. The Nebraska State League, I think, disbanded after that year. So professional baseball in the Pecos League is returning to North Platte after 65 years this year. They will be visiting us, but we will not be traveling there. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. Let's talk about the season. Roswell begins the season May 30th after a week of training camp or so. And they start off with the Austin Weirdos. And I know you pitched for them. You mentioned that earlier in our conversation. But I have questions. And my first question is, how did they get nicknamed the Weirdos?
Well, Austin is a little bit of an offbeat city. I think each part of the country has their own. I think Portland, Oregon. I think if you go to Portland, Oregon, you'll see T-shirts, Keep Portland Weird. I think Austin has similar T-shirts. It's just offbeat, especially for Texas. They have tie-dyed uniforms. They're actually an all-road team this year. Last year, when I pitched for them, they started out at home. And unfortunately, the field dried out so badly, and also it was not to the quality that they needed for the league. There was a tree in center field. They had to fence it off, and as a result, it was only 300 feet from home plate, and the field didn't work. That was passed on to me by somebody else. It could be an urban legend, but it certainly sounds like a good story. The team went from to an all-road team last year after they lost their home field, and I think there was some trouble with getting host families. Players stay with host families, so they were on the road all year last year, and that's where I joined up with them. And I'll be seeing their manager is the same manager that I had last year, Derek Dominguez. I'm going to give Derek a big hug because he was the one who asked me to start a Friday night game in Alpine, Texas. What happened with Alpine last year, because they were an all-road team, and you already understand the rigors of travel, their team was down to 11 guys for the last series of the season. And there were 4 games scheduled in Alpine, including a doubleheader on Saturday. And here I am meeting the team in Alpine. They were driving from Blackwell the night before. They had to drive 600 miles from Blackwell to Alpine. And I was texting with him during the day, and he said, my guys are exhausted. And I said, Derek, if you want, I can start tonight. And he said, you're starting. So I ended up pitching 4 innings. I think I told you I gave up 12 earned runs, 13 total. I want to note I threw 39 of 51 pitches for strikes, by the way, and no home runs and no walks. So, but I'm going to give Derek a hug because Derek is going to be in with Austin, and they have tie-dyed uniforms this year to reinforce the name Weirdos. And I believe, we're the Roswell Invaders, and we're called the Invaders because, as some people might know, in 1947, a spaceship crashed in Roswell with aliens on board. And supposedly the government covered it up, or there were reports in the paper, the local officials were involved, and it's shrouded in mystery. And Roswell is now known as the space alien capital of the desert Southwest. And there's all kinds of alien museums and commemorations. I think there's an escape room for families that are visiting. There's an escape room theme park, whatever they're called, with an alien flavor to it. But we have lime green shirts that we wear sometimes, and I think we're going to be wearing our lime green shirts, and we have special lime green pants. So we're going to be playing the Weirdos in their tie-dyed uniforms, and we're going to be wearing our lime green uniforms when we have opening night on May 30th. And you can watch it live on your laptop if you want. All of our games are live streamed, so you can look at those wild uniforms if you log in to watch the Invaders home opener at 6:30 on May 30th.
And that's at Joe Bauman Stadium in Roswell, New Mexico. Joe Bauman, whose last stop in minor league baseball was at Roswell with the Rockets in 53 to 56, if I remember right. He was a former Hartford Chiefs farmhand for a year before winding up down there in Roswell. Now, do you go in blind to opponents? Do you know anything about opponents? What do you know about the weirdos so far? Anything?
Actually, can I just backtrack for a second? I think with Joe Bauman, before we leave that topic, we should point out that in 1954, 70 years ago, he hit 72 home runs in one season. And that became the all-time record for a professional player in a season until it was broken by Barry Bonds in 2001. And this is the 70th anniversary, and the field is named after Joe Bauman. And if anyone is interested to look up Joe Bauman's baseball biography, even though he never played in the major leagues, his baseball career is documented in SABR, in the player biographies part of the SABR webpage. I think he had 199 RBIs that year as well. For anyone that looks it up, there's some pretty astounding statistics. Again, high altitude baseball. It was a low level, fairly low level minor league, but that is why the stadium is named for Joe Bauman. To answer your question, Bruce, about preparing, I think this is one of the things that I'll be working with Garrett on. And I think that there's some level of intelligence that you can gather. We don't have any technology in our stadiums. We don't have PitchCom. So this is really a little bit of old-time baseball. And, Garrett has played in the league and managed in the league, I think, for 5 or 6 years. He knows a lot of the players. But you can look at statistics, the previous players who are returning. You can look at a guy's strikeout rate, look at his walk rate. A lot of college guys, that the college players coming in, they have fairly advanced statistics. You look at the ground ball, fly ball percentage. You can look at power. You can look at stolen bases. I mean, there's a certain amount of information that you can gather either from familiarity with a player or looking online. And that's one of the things I'll be working on with Garrett as we prepare for the season and the first series with Alpine. Then we travel to Pecos for a couple of games, but we're really gearing up for our first trip to Alpine. That is going to be the first test of the season during the second week of the season in early June.
We'll be talking about a lot of these games and experiences throughout the season. But our little podcast, we use the word stories in our little podcast. And I've heard a story, a mystery, if you will, about the case of the missing ball player. And you and I have spoken about this. We talked about this before we started getting this down this morning. Let's start the storytelling with this one. What can you tell me about the case of the missing ball player?
Well, I think you're asking about the recruiting process, which yes. A lot of it's by phone. You make initial phone contact and there's text. And there was a player who I was following in Canada, had worked really hard at a pitching facility for a couple of years, was very excited about coming, had played in college in the United States, looked like he was going to be joining us in Roswell. And I started texting him to ask about his plans. And all of a sudden, he texted me that he was having problems with his visa coming from Canada. Now, I'm not an expert on immigration and visas and tourism, but okay, I guess that's possible. I mean, we've heard in professional baseball, especially players coming from other countries, that visas sometimes, there's a special visa for athletes. For those that don't know, I believe it's called a P1 or a P1A. There's a special visa that requires the teams to send a letter on the player's behalf to show that they're going to be working for them and playing for them and that sort of thing. But I was kind of surprised that a player would have visa problems coming from Canada. And I texted back and said, can we talk about it? Can we see if we can solve this problem? I even contacted a friend who was an immigration lawyer to understand how complicated could this be? And he said, well, he might need to have one if he's going to be playing for you, and it does take a few weeks, and if he's waited too long, it could be a problem. And I said, okay, and I texted him. I believe I even called him, and he just disappeared, absolutely disappeared. And this was a kid who attended college in the United States. He attended a facility in, I believe it's in North Carolina, called Tread Athletics. Mm-hmm. It's a pitching program, very similar to Driveline, which I think many people know in Seattle. There's one in Boston, Eric Cressy in Boston and Florida. Driveline, I think, is also in the Southwest. Top Velocity in New Orleans. There are these very intense, very detailed, technology-based pitching programs to support developing pitchers. And this pitcher had twice gone to Tread Athletics in North Carolina, and all of a sudden he can't come, and I can't raise him. He just disappeared. This enthusiastic pitcher who was left-handed also, which we really were excited about, having a good left-handed pitcher, just disappeared, went missing. Never heard from him again. Weeks passed, and I said, well, he's just disappeared. Well, one of the things I do in my search for ball players is I spend a lot of time on the internet looking at statistics, looking at backgrounds of players. And I said, oh, let me just Google the player just for fun to see his name pops up. And sure enough, he was signed by a team in Canada. He's staying in Canada to pitch. And I don't know why he wasn't able to tell me. I mean, one of the things when I talk to players and they have a choice to go to a couple of places, different leagues, or they're going to stay in college for another year, I always want the players to make the decision that's best for them. I have another year of eligibility at school. Oh yeah, you should stay. Get your graduate degree, play for another year, and then move on. Or I've got a choice to go to. There's a professional league called the United Shore League in Michigan. There's another one in Portland, Oregon called the Mavericks League. And the Pioneer League and the Frontier League are recruiting players. I never want to twist a player's arm. I don't think that that's right. I give them a pitch. I tell them the Pecos League's advantages. And I say, I hope you'll give it some thought. I think we can bring out the best in you. It's a great opportunity to be seen. You're going to be playing every day. So I don't pressure them. Sometimes I'll give a little bit harder pitch than other times. But when I found out that this player had signed in another league, I was really happy for him. But I really wish he had just let me know, because I would have said, that's great, fantastic, go and get it. And so that solved the case of the missing ball player, but it really encapsulated so many different aspects of how I spent the last 6 months recruiting players and talking to them. And recruiting is a little bit like fishing. You really have to cast your line a lot before you get the big hit. And the percentages are pretty low. So you just get used to the fact that some players disappear. Some players say they're going to stay in college. Some players say they're going to go to another league. Because the other thing is, and I said this to a player the other day, I said, I don't want to rush you when you make your decision, because if you come to Roswell, I don't want you to think that you didn't have enough time to think or you didn't have enough information. Because if you come to Roswell to play and your mind is not 100% committed and focused to the Invaders, it will eat away at you and it will sidetrack you. So I give my best pitch. I hope they come to Roswell, and we've been successful to get a good group of players starting out. But the recruiting goes down many, many, many paths that you don't expect.
The twists and turns of baseball's entry level.
Right. And this is, players are, this is the interesting thing with the Pioneer League and Frontier League, and there's also a league in upstate New York called the Empire League. There are so many options for college players now that it's very competitive. But what also happens is, because our season starts at the end of May, we also get players who tried out for the Pioneer League, who tried out for the Frontier League, didn't make it, and now they're saying, oh, I want to come to the Pecos League because I want to put up some good numbers and get back and show them that I can deserve a shot at the Frontier League. You have a lot of players, especially with COVID and the transfer portal. There's very few college players now that you look at their records that have stayed, and you have players playing at junior colleges. You're not going to see many players at colleges for 3 or 4 years anymore. And so it's sometimes a little hard to evaluate their numbers. Sometimes a player will change schools. They think they're going to get a playing opportunity, and they get hurt, or there's more competition for the position that the coach said that they were going to be able to play on a regular basis. So there are just so many wild card factors that affect a player's journey to professional baseball that they have. It's hard to evaluate them a lot of times. The other league, the Frontier League and Pioneer League, have tryouts. The Pecos League has tryouts also. Players go there and they try to show their best. I had one kid I talked to yesterday who went to, I think, a Frontier League tryout. He's a very good defensive outfielder. He said, I'm a pretty good hitter. I'm a pretty good base runner, but I'm really good in the outfield. I got a great arm. I can throw the ball on a line to any base. I run great routes. He never had a chance to show that in the tryouts. The tryouts, it's usually hitting and a little bit of fielding, not much. Nothing rigorous where you're going to be able to show off in the outfield. So there's all kinds of unknowns that make it hard to evaluate a player. So when you're talking to them, whether it's a position player or a pitcher, you look at the statistics. I ask the players to describe themselves, how they play, what's their approach at the plate, how do they run the bases, what's their strength, what are their biggest strengths in the outfield. You try to, it's almost like a job interview, and you take a look at the information that you get verbally, you look online, you meld it together, and then I confer with Garrett, should we invite this player to camp or not? And that's how I've been spending the last 6 months.
And all I can say to that is God bless you, because I don't know how you guys do it down there. Put together a team and keep it all together and keep it moving forward with the challenges and the budgets and everything that you've got to face. But I know this, I'm going to be tuning in to see how the Roswell Invaders do this year. And I hope that we're going to get together on a weekly basis to discuss the Roswell Invaders and the Pecos League and talk about the stories that come out of the league, the stories that come out of your experiences, and maybe a championship for the Roswell Invaders as well.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I've got the time blocked out for next Monday. I'll be able to give you a report about training camp. As I told you, I think the Invaders, I think I mentioned, are 4-time champions. Last year was the first time. Didn't make the playoffs. Our goal is playoffs and championship this year.
We're going to be tuning in weekly, and we're going to follow the team throughout the season. Now, I want to thank everybody for listening today, and don't forget, set your podcatcher to grab each week's episode as it's available. And if you like this podcast, please review it on your favorite platform, share it with your friends, and go to pecosleague.com for more information. You can even stream games live there too. There's a stream button, click that, and you're going to be able to watch the Invaders go for the Pecos League 2024 championship right on your computer screen. But finally, I want to let you know that if you are a hardcore baseball fan, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, today's premier baseball community, offering amazing baseball buffets of options to explore your fandom. SABR boasts more than 35 different research committees, 70 regional chapters, not to mention innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. For Evan Katz, my name is Bruce McClure. We're going to see you next week. Thanks all for listening. Good night for now.